Good morning everyone and welcome to our MGB 371 workshop. Today our team will be exploring one of the most significant and emerging issues in human resource management, the right to disconnect. In an era where work, emails and messages follow us home, the topic raises an important question. How do we protect employee well-being while maintaining organisational productivity? Our focus is on the Queensland education sector, particularly Education Queensland schools, institutions and universities. With new legislation coming into effect from August 2024, employees in medium to large organisations, including Education Queensland EQ, will be legally entitled to refuse unreasonable work-related communication outside of standard hours. This makes it vital for EQ not only to ensure compliance, but also to use this reform as an opportunity to address workload, well-being and retention challenges currently facing the profession. Our proposal is to embed the right to disconnect into professional development PD time. The aim is to make sure staff are fully aware of the policy and, more importantly, supported with clear, practical strategies to apply it into their daily work. Our team brings together a wide range of backgrounds, from teaching placements and recruitment to HR coordination, psychology, law and frontline work, giving us both academic insight and lived experiences of workplace challenges. Together we have shaped this workshop to respond directly to the realities faced by educators in Queensland. Now to introduce the team. My name is Alice Parker. I'm a final year double degree student, specialising in a degree of business, human resource management, and a degree of fine arts in film, screen, and new media. I'm currently working at my first corporate office job. The experience has helped me gain a stronger understanding and clarity towards my degree as I head towards my graduation into the real world.
Hey everyone, my name's Ashley Graham and I'm a final year student in a double degree of business and education, majoring in human resources. Having recently completed my final teaching placement, I've seen firsthand the workload and the after-hours pressure that teachers face every single day. In my role as a human resource coordinator, I've also seen how important and crucial policies like the right to disconnect are to well-being and culture.
My name is Natasha Prasad, and I am in my final year studying double degree in business and justice. I currently work in retail, which has given me valuable insight into the challenges of frontline work and has made me more passionate about employee well-being and fair workplace practices.
Hi, my name is Rana Othman. I am a final year HR and marketing student. I'm currently working an entry-level role in recruitment as a recruitment officer, and this will help me contribute to the team with an insider perspective of how role descriptions and ads are made to look more desirable to candidates for a variety of roles within the Metro South Health sector.
My name is Natasha Medland and I'm a final year psychology and business student, majoring in HR. I find that my degree has given me a unique perspective in understanding and exploring how a person's behaviour can influence mental health and well-being, and how these factors play a role in organisational performance and development.
My name is Georgia Roberts and I'm a 5th year student completing a business and law degree majoring in HR. Having worked various roles within Metro South Health, both patient facing as the hospital's correspondence officer and as an executive support for a director, I have first-hand experience with being contacted outside of my working hours. This experience has opened my eyes to what is also expected of our teachers, day in and day out.
Our workshop today will focus on 3 key objectives. Firstly, to explain what the right to disconnect is and why it matters so deeply in education. This reform is more than a legal update, it's a recognition of pressures faced by teachers alike. By clarifying what counts as reasonable versus unreasonable out-of-hours contact, we can ensure both compliance and confidence for staff members. Second, to analyse the implications of HR policies, staff well-being and organisational responsibilities. The RTD highlights challenges that already exist: excessive workloads, high stress and rising attrition. For HR, it requires questions about contracts, allowances and communication practices, while at an organisational level, it requires leadership to set consistent boundaries for staff, parents and students alike. Thirdly, we will be recommending practical, evidence-based actions that leaders and HR practitioners can implement to make the policy meaningful in practice. This includes embedding training into professional development time, giving teachers strategies to reduce after-hours work, and drawing on global and national industry examples, such as email curfews or clear on-call systems, to show how RTD can work in the education sector. Ultimately, the right to disconnect isn't about neglecting responsibility, it's about respecting boundaries, restoring rest, and sustaining the long-term health of our teaching community. If Education Queensland can embrace this reform strategically, it will not only meet a legal standard, it will strengthen staff well-being, retention, and performance, building a more resilient and attractive education system for the future.
We feel great importance stems from having an understanding of what the right to disconnect actually is. The right to disconnect is a new workplace right under the Fair Work Act 2009, introduced through the Fair Work Legislation Amendment, Closing Loopholes No. 2 Act in 2024. From the 26th of August 2024, employees in medium to large organisations, including Education Queensland, are legally entitled to refuse to monitor, read or respond to work-related communications outside of their ordinary work hours, unless their refusal is unreasonable. Whether refusal is unreasonable depends on the purpose and urgency of the contact, how disruptive it is to the employee's personal life, the nature of the employee's role, compensation or allowances for after-hours contact, and the employee's personal circumstances. The right to disconnect provides employees with legal protection from adverse action if they decline unreasonable after-hours work demands, and disputes can be escalated to the Fair Work Commission. Imagine finishing a long school day, heading home to family only to receive a message from a parent at 8 p.m, or being expected to check emails over the weekend. For many educators in Queensland, these moments are familiar. These exact situations are why the right to disconnect is so important for Education Queensland. Too many of our teachers are faced with blurred boundaries, where the working day rarely ends with the bell. There is often a pressure to respond to parent emails and messages in the evenings, mark and prepare lessons late into the night, and engage in after-school meetings or extracurricular activities and remain contactable for emergencies. Education Queensland is currently facing an ongoing teacher retention crisis, where excessive workloads and burnout are leading causes of teachers leaving the profession. The right to disconnect directly addresses these concerns by legally reinforcing the need for downtime and enabling teachers and staff to rest and recover. The retention crisis also plays into the expectations placed on teaching staff. Implementing the right to disconnect means Education Queensland must actively redefine expectations for staff, parents, and students alike. To better understand the real-world impact of the right to disconnect, we can look globally. In France, the right to disconnect law has been enshrined since 2016 and requires companies with 50 or more employees to negotiate agreements or create charters to regulate digital communication outside of working hours. While the law's implementation across organisations has been uneven, evidence from the 2023 Eurofound report, Right to Disconnect, Implementation and Impact at Company Level, shows that in companies which do have the right to disconnect policies, workers report significantly better work-life balance, greater job satisfaction, and fewer negative health symptoms, such as stress, anxiety, and headaches, than in the workplaces without such policies. However, Eurofound also cautions that simply having a policy is not enough. Accompanying measures like awareness-raising training, monitoring, and genuine enforcement are needed for meaningful change. And while enforcement has its challenges, the cultural shift it has triggered is significant. Bringing it back to Australia, the right to disconnect is particularly relevant in the education sector. According to a Black Dog Institute National Teachers Survey, 52% reported moderate to extremely severe depression, 46.2% anxiety, and 59.7% stress. The same survey also identified that 75.6% of teachers said they felt burnt out from their work, either often or all of the time. And these statistics are not just numbers. They reflect the lived reality of educators being stretched too thin, often feeling undervalued and unable to find balance between their professional and personal lives. When implementing the right to disconnect, it's crucial to recognise all of the stakeholders involved, first being the teachers. Teachers are directly impacted as the policy shapes their daily routines, well-being, and ability to maintain a healthy work-life balance. Second, the heads of department and school leaders. The heads of department and school leaders are also key, as they will need to model appropriate communication practices and ensure consistency across teams, though this may also create challenges as they can no longer expect the same level of after-hours availability from staff, requiring adjustments to planning and delegation. Third, being the parents and students. They play an indirect yet significant role. While the parent policy protects teachers' personal time, some parents may feel frustrated or believe teachers are not dedicating enough time to their child's learning or communication needs. And lastly, the Department of Education, government bodies and teacher boards, such as the unions, are responsible for setting clear guidelines, providing resources and ensuring compliance across all schools. From a strategic human resource management perspective, adopting and embedding the right to disconnect is not merely a legal compliance issue, it is a tool to enhance organisational sustainability. For Education Queensland, positioning itself as a progressive and supportive employer can serve to attract and retain high-quality teachers in a competitive labour market. Implementing the right to disconnect policies effectively could become a key differentiator for recruitment, particularly as younger generations prioritise mental health and work-life balance more than previous cohorts. Moreover, reducing burnout through the right to disconnect directly influences performance and productivity. A rested and mentally healthy workforce is more engaged, more creative, and less prone to absenteeism. Over time, this can translate into better student outcomes, a goal that aligns with the core mission of Education Queensland. There is an economic dimension to this issue as well. High staff turnover in education is costly. Replacing a single teacher, especially in rural or hard-to-staff areas, can cost thousands in recruitment, onboarding, and lost productivity. According to the Grattan Institute, Australia could save millions annually by addressing teacher attrition through workload reform and improved conditions. The right to disconnect is a step forward toward that reform. Though there may be short-term costs in training and implementation, the long-term economic benefits far outweigh them.
Ethically, the right to disconnect reflects a shift towards respecting boundaries in an era where work has become increasingly invasive. With mobile phones, laptops, and remote learning platforms, teachers are more connected than ever, but at what cost? Expecting constant availability undermines employee autonomy and breaches basic principles of dignity and respect. Ethical HRM is not just about compliance, it's about creating environments where employees feel psychologically safe and valued. In Education Queensland, where educators often go above and beyond for their students, setting limits can feel counterintuitive. But boundaries are not barriers, they are safeguards. They protect staff from exploitation, even when it's unintentional, and promote a culture where rest is not only accepted but encouraged. However, ethical tension increases when there is a clash between the right to disconnect and the operational needs of the job. Teachers have a right to decline additional commitments outside regular teaching hours, like chaperoning extracurricular activities. At the same time, it is also important to regulate expectations between teacher, student, and parent communication via email and messaging, having clear and consistent policies in place. Defining what constitutes reasonable response times will ensure fairness, trust, and overall well-being. Socially, the implementation of the right to disconnect also aligns with growing corporate responsibility to support employee well-being. Teaching is a profession built on care. Care for students, for communities, for futures. But we cannot expect teachers to continuously give from an empty cup. By formally acknowledging the right to disconnect, Education Queensland signals that it values its staff not just as workers, but as whole people, deserving of rest, family time, and mental space. It also contributes to a healthier work culture, one that values recovery and boundaries, which can ripple into the broader community. As the right to disconnect focuses on improving employee work-life balance, it must consider the role of psychological safety and employees' digital job demands. Research indicates that a strong psychological safety is linked to reduced digital job demands and work-life conflict. When employees have equitable access to rest, there is less risk of emotional exhaustion and burnout, which benefits carers, flex workers, and marginalised groups in both hybrid and post-COVID work contexts. Legally, the right to disconnect is now enshrined in the Fair Work Act, making it enforceable through the Fair Work Commission. This means employers must carefully consider how workplace policies and management expectations align with the law. Failure to do so can expose organisations to legal risks, including unfair dismissal claims or general protections disputes. Therefore, Education Queensland must update its internal policies, contracts and communication protocols to reflect these changes. This includes setting clear boundaries for acceptable contact hours and providing training for leaders on respecting employee downtime. Being a part of legislation, it is also important to understand the process when the right to disconnect goes through the Australian courts. Being a grey area for employers, it is sometimes difficult identifying the difference between cases of employee misconduct and regular workplace communication. Employers will have to navigate contextual cues when approaching every situation to understand how the right to disconnect may link to disciplinary processes and medical circumstances. In Australia's private sector, companies like Telstra and PwC have introduced the right to disconnect protocols, which designated quiet hours built into employee calendars and reinforced by leadership behaviour, indicating that while cultural change is possible, it must be modelled through a top-down approach. Looking more specifically into the education sector, some schools have already begun trialling innovative approaches. In France, online platforms like ENT, used for sharing timetables, homework, grades, and messages, will no longer update between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. Similarly, a pilot program in Victoria saw several schools adopt email curfews, where teachers were encouraged not to check or respond to emails after 5 p.m. The result? Increased morale, greater focus during school hours, reduced fatigue and stress, and improved communication practices.
While the right to disconnect offers legal protection and well-being benefits, implementing it in Education Queensland faces several practical challenges. Firstly, teachers' work naturally extends beyond standard hours. A 2022 report by the Australian Council of Educational Research found that Australian teachers spend an average of 9 hours per week on unpaid after-hours work, including lesson planning and marking. This makes it difficult to define what counts as reasonable contact and creates uncertainty for staff. Secondly, workplace culture reinforces these expectations. A 2021 survey by the Queensland College of Teachers found that 58% of educators felt pressure from leadership or colleagues to respond outside normal hours when it wasn't urgent. Cultural habits like these can persist despite legal protections. Thirdly, technology adds another layer of challenge. With systems like Outlook, Teams, and online learning platforms, teachers can receive notifications at any time. Studies show that constant digital connectivity increases stress levels by up to 25 to 30% in educational professionals, highlighting the real impact on well-being. Finally, some roles require urgent after-hours work, such as responding to student safety issues or emergency notifications. Balancing operational needs with staff well-being requires careful consideration. These barriers demonstrate that the right to disconnect cannot simply exist on paper. They highlight the need for clear boundaries, leadership modelling, and thoughtful HR planning, which leads directly into the implications for organisational policies and practices. The next section of our workshop.
The introduction of the right to disconnect has significant implications for Queensland Education's HRM policies, governance and culture. As a large public sector employer, the department is not only required to comply with the Fair Work Act, but also expected to set the standard for healthy, sustainable work practices across Queensland's education system. The first major implication lies in HR policy and governance. Since all modern awards now include RTD provisions, Queensland Education must ensure its enterprise agreements, HR policies and role statements are consistent with these new legal requirements. However, compliance alone is not enough. As psychosocial safety climate theory highlights, well-being policies only have real impact when they are backed by leadership commitment, clear communication, and accountability structures. In practice, this means Queensland Education must translate legal compliance into everyday clarity for staff. What counts as reasonable contact, what doesn't, and how issues will be resolved internally. Without this clarity, disputes may escalate to Fair Work Commission, exposing the organisation to reputational and legal risk. From an organisational support theory lens, Inconsistency between policy and lived experiences can signal to employees that their well-being is not genuinely prioritized. Over time, that perception can erode trust and weaken engagement across the workforce. Beyond governance, RTD carries significant workforce management and cultural implications. Education has long normalized a culture of after hours and late night marking, weekend lesson plannings, and constant communication with parents and colleagues. For many teachers, being always on has been seen as part of professional dedication. But under the job demands resource model, this constant availability is a key driver of burnout. Excessive job demands, like after-hours contact, drain energy and psychological resources, while the ability to recover is what sustains motivation and performance. RTD therefore represents a cultural reset. Leaders, especially principals and deputies, must model boundary-respecting behaviors to normalize switching off after hours. This aligns with social learning theory, which shows that employees mirror the behavior of authority figures. If leaders continue spending emails at night, it signals that disconnection is not truly supported. In this sense, RTD is not just an HR compliance issue, it's a leadership challenge that requires consistent modeling and reinforcement. Another critical implication is the need for role differentiation. Education Queensland operates across highly diverse contexts, from urban schools to remote communities, and some positions, such as emergency maintenance or IT support, require legitimate on-call availability. RTD therefore cannot be applied as a one-size-fits-all rule. Instead, HR policies must clearly distinguish between ordinary roles and those with operational on-call responsibilities. This distinction not only ensures fairness, but also aligns with equity theory, reinforcing perceptions of justice and consistency with the workforce. Culturally, RTD also intersects with Queensland Education's equity and well-being objectives. Research shows that after-hours expectations disproportionately affect employees with caring responsibilities, often women, who bear a greater share of unpaid domestic labor. Embedding RTD effectively can therefore strengthen inclusion and gender equity outcomes, advancing the department's diversity and well-being goals. From a strategic HRM perspective, this alignment demonstrates how compliance-driven changes can simultaneously drive broader organizational values and improve the employee value proposition. At the strategic level, the implications are equally significant. Teacher burnout and attrition have become critical issues across Australia, with workload and stress consistently cited as top reasons for leaving the profession. Safe Work Australia identifies excessive connectivity and lack of recovery time as psychosocial hazards under National Workplace Safety Guidelines. This means Queensland Education's approach to RTD will directly influence not only staff well-being, but also workforce retention, absenteeism rates, and long-term capability. By effectively integrating RTD into its HR system, the department has an opportunity to demonstrate leadership in employee well-being and public sector governance. It signals to current and prospective employees that Queensland Education values both professional contribution and personal boundaries. This strengthens organizational reputation and supports its positioning as an employer of choice, particularly vital in an environment of ongoing teacher shortages. Conversely, a failure to embed RTD meaningfully would carry serious risks. If policies exist only on paper, the psychosocial safety climate weakens, staff disengagement deepens, and fair work disputes become more likely. A gap between rhetoric and reality could also damage public trust, especially given the department's visibility and responsibility to model ethical employment standards. Ultimately, the right to disconnect is not just a legislative update, it's a cultural and strategic inflection point for Queensland Education. It compels the organisation to re-examine how work is structured, how leadership communicates, and how well-being is prioritised alongside performance. The theories we've all drawn on all point to the same conclusion. Sustainable employee performance depends on balance, fairness, and trust. The right to disconnect is not just about reducing after-hours contact. It's about redefining the social contract between the organisation and its employees. If embraced fully, it offers a pathway to restore professional boundaries, strengthen well-being, and build a more resilient, equitable education workforce for the future.
Our recommendation is to run an informative and interactive training session for teachers. This would look like showing what the right to disconnect policy looks like, but also equipping them with examples and strategies that they could use. The session would be broken up into 3 main parts. The first part, we would break down the policy. So this isn't just about reading it out loud, but putting it into simple and plain language, and also showing how it applies to them in their situation or their department, so everyone understands what their rights and responsibilities are. The second part of the session would be a constructed conversation space. Teachers would have the chance to talk about some of the challenges that they face and why they can't disconnect after hours. It's a safe and respectful environment to share what's tough and hear from other departments. And also they can start brainstorming solutions together. This supports psychological safety and inclusion by recognizing that experiences differ. For example, staff with caring responsibilities. In the third part of the session, we would use worksheets and activities. These would help the staff reflect on where their time goes after school, but also work together to come up with strategies to reduce that load. For example, departments might agree on sharing their planning resources or trialing ways to speed up marking using tools on QLearn. The activities also make sure that these strategies don't just stay as ideas, but they can later be formalized, put into documents by head of department or senior leadership. By structuring the session in these 3 parts, we're not just telling the teachers what the policy is and that how they should listen to it, but actually how they can apply it and put it into practice in ways that works for them in their school, but also in their department. Now, to give you a better idea of what this might look like in practice, we are going to show a mock example video of what one of these training sessions might look like. Thanks everyone for coming today. Today I'm going to give you 3 documents to guide our session. Document 1 will be the right to disconnect policy, so that we're going to unpack it together and really understand what it means and how we can apply this to your work. Document 2 will be a reflection and brainstorm sheet. The first section that we're going to do is we're going to jot down everything that usually takes up your time in the evenings. And then the second section will give you space to brainstorm strategies in your department to reduce that load. Document 3 is a formal action plan. This will be completed in your department after today and signed off by head of department and senior leadership. It will document the strategies that we've agreed on today and outline how they'll be maintained through periodic check-ins. Okay, let's begin with document 1. So once we've got that first page opened up, we can see the policy, which makes it really clear that teachers are not expected to respond to work communication outside of hours. So, unless it's an emergency. So how does that sit with you guys?
To be honest, I often get emails at night from parents. It's hard not to feel like I need to reply straight away.
Great example. That's exactly where the policy comes in. Instead of replying at 8 p.m, you could schedule an email for the next morning. That way you've done the work, but you're still protecting your own downtime. Let's keep that in mind as we move on to the reflection sheet. Now I want you to open up document 2. The first part asks, what usually keeps you connected in the evenings? I want you to jot down 2 or 3 things. Now feel free to share some of the things that you guys mentioned.
For me, it's definitely planning lessons. I'm always trying to find resources or make PowerPoints after hours.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I'd say marking. It's never ending and it follows me home every night.
Yeah, I agree. Plus admin tasks like updating QLearn or chasing late assignments, it's always creeping into my evenings.
Awesome. Let's shift into the brainstorm section. So the prompt here is, what strategies could your department use to reduce these tasks that we mentioned so that you can disconnect after work? For planning,
What's one strategy that we think could help?
We could create a shared resource bank. If one person develops a lab activity, everyone can use it.
Exactly. In English, we often recreate similar worksheets. Sharing them would save hours.
Great. So now for marking, what do we think that we could try?
Maybe trialing a real-time feedback in class. If students submit their drafts on Qlearn, I could use AI to give a quick response during the class time instead of having to take piles home.
We could also use more rubrics and examples. If students know exactly what to aim for, the marking becomes so much easier.
Excellent. Now I want you to capture all of those ideas that we just discussed, and this way we can start building strategies that fit your department. Let's get started. Finally, let's look at document 3. This will be the formal action plan. If everyone could open up document 3. This is where your department will commit to 1 or 2 strategies and outline who will be responsible, and decide how you'll check in on progress. For example, your head of department might schedule a review every term to see if the strategy is actually working and whether adjustments are needed.
So, if we say our strategy is a shared planning bank, we record that, list who sets it up, and then note that we review it each term.
Exactly. So the key is making it manageable and sustainable. It's not about doing more work, it's about shifting how we work so the right to disconnect becomes real and not just a policy on paper.
Based on the workshop and the 3 biggest dividers of after-hour work that were identified, the following recommendations are directed at teachers. However, we also suggest that these practices be formally embedded into Queensland health education policy. We have used the SMART framework to design them, and HR theories such as the Jobs Demands Resources model and psychological detachment. The first is to create a shared resource bank, so teachers do not have to build lessons and assessments from scratch, reducing the amount of after-hour work spent on lesson plans and repetition. The second is implementing communication etiquette by drafting and scheduling emails to only be sent during work hours, creating a boundary that respects the teacher's time and does not deplete their energy, allowing psychological detachment. The third is trialing real-time feedback in class, using Qlearn or AI tools to build immediate student feedback and reduce the need for extensive marking outside of school times. These will be effective because, as stated before, teachers are experiencing excessive demand that drains their energy. Shared resources, clearer and easier to mark rubrics, and scheduled communication will be steps that we can take that reduce strain and increase their engagement. By setting these transparent boundaries for everyone, organizational justice will also be enhanced, as teachers will see this process as fair. And to ensure this process is equitable and inclusive and consistent with psychological risk guidance, after-hour traffic will be monitored to ensure changes don't indirectly disadvantage people like carers that take on the brunt of late tasks and adjust allocations where needed. Any genuine on-call requirements will be defined, rostered, and compensated, so availability is planned and not presumed. To wrap this up, let's bring the whole story together. We have explained to you what the right to disconnect law is in simpler terms, which is a legal right that protects employees from burnout and allows them to refuse unreasonable work contact outside of ordinary hours. In the education sector, specifically, that right is not unclear. It is realistic, as you saw before, when an email from a parent is received at 8 p.m., or when marking a student's work leaks into personal time, and when a teacher is expected to stay alert on any changes and updates over the weekend. This new reform was not only a compliance threshold for Education Queensland, it is an opportunity to fix an old and constantly worsening problem, the wearing of recovery time that teachers have, fueling their stress. We then put the legal framework into the education context to further show how this will affect Education Queensland. The law's reasonable test is not black and white. It requires deep thinking to find balance for every industry. What is the purpose of the out-of-hour contact? How urgent is it? How disruptive is it on the employee and their personal life? What are the agreed-upon role requirements? How does this employee receive compensation? This rule is not a universal curfew. It is dependent on circumstances, and it is clear, job-specific, and equitable. We then explained what this will mean for human resource professionals and leaders, specifically showing that the right to disconnect can't be a lone policy. It has to connect with rosters, workload, flexible work, health and safety duties, and inclusion. This policy is not only a governance reform, it is a cultural reset. The proposal we gave explained how the policy can be made real by integrating the right to disconnect training into personal development time. That way, the team will leave with a deep understanding of the reasonable test and the law's details. They will also leave with a signed department-owned action plan that details strategies like clearer rubrics to cut marking time, contact etiquette such as scheduled sends and response time windows. This personal development approach won't just drown them in information. It will equip, align, and help create a better balance. It is effective because it targets root causes that our research has flagged. Based on the jobs demands resources model, we have turned excess job demands like after-hour contact into managed demand resource systems, using agreed escalation, autonomy, and roster coverage. This implementation has protected the recovery and fairness of teachers and will strengthen their engagement. We have shown you what the success in this strategy will look like and have been upfront about the challenges. Time zones, emergency response, and community expectations will still be prevalent after implementation, but it is precisely why a design system is needed. Rather than continuing with the current system that just tells employees to do their best without providing any real resources or protection, a system that sets expectation, escalation rules, and removes the pressure to always be on, creates equity within teams. People with carers' responsibilities often suffer the most from out-of-hour contact and demands. Implementing the right to disconnect in a way that sets boundaries will not only make Education Queensland comply with these laws, it will make the workload fair. So what are the main messages we want you to take from today? Number 1, policies are important, but leadership is too. Modeled behavior is essential as it sets up the workplace to flow in that expectation. When a leader schedules meetings, respects work hours, and complies with these regulations, it creates an example for the workplace to do the same. Number 2, this intends to create a culture of clarity, where staff, parents, and partners understand what the expectations are. We define urgent specifically, and we compensate for extra availability, and we solve issues respectfully and swiftly. Number 3, work design must change as much as communication. If coverage, rosters, and service level agreements are not developed accordingly, the system will be less effective. And finally, number 4, this is how we retain teachers. Predictable downtime, sustainable workloads, and routines are retention strategies. This change will reduce turnover and protect the psychological safety of teachers, which will ultimately make the school environment a better place for students and other stakeholders. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope you retained a lot of information from this workshop.